Welcome back. You wanted to say something about museums?
Absolutely. I think one of the key concerns, and I've found this very troubling around the current debates, is this notion that you can do away with colonial symbols by relegating to museums, because that makes museums nothing other than receptacles of our colonial and apartheid past.
But sometimes museums are very powerful places. If you go to the Holocaust Museum in Berlin, it's an incredibly powerful experience.
Absolutely. The reality of the situation, though, is that we're expecting museums, as we are expecting many other institutions like universities, to transform. At the same time, they are hugely underfunded, understaffed, and the sector in general is in crisis. Right? So they don't have funding to do impressive exhibitions that we might find at the Berlin Museum.
But
there's
do you
this deep
that
seated challenge that our museum sector is faced with. So the problem that we have is that we don't see moving memorials simply to holdings in museums as the solution, because they have their own challenges, and secondly, that they actually play an important part to contextualize and bring understanding to our past, as you suggested. But they don't have the resources at present to do that.
But sorry, like in a place like Budapest, they've taken all the Stalin statues, they put it in one particular garden where you can go and look at these things.
Well, colonial theme parks is also not something that we would want to encourage.
But do you take the point that leaving statues in this unqualified fashion is a form of celebration, and a celebration of an obscene history?
Absolutely, we completely agree with that, and it's a very, very valid point.
The
point that we make is, are there not other ways in telling the other narrative?
Well, we're trying to explore that.
And I just very briefly today looked at a list of public memorials in South Africa, and actually late 20th century political history is nowadays very well represented. What we don't see, for example, are resistant movements to colonial conquest, for example, the ZAR. So my question is the removal of the Kruger statue on Church Square the best way of countering that symbolism?
All right, well, that's a
Are
question.
there not other
you've
ways?
made your point, yes.
I mean, there are two things. One, statues in universities, which I've written quite trenchantly on, and statues in public places.
Why is there a difference?
The difference, as I said, universities are places that encourage critical thinking, so they shouldn't...
So if you had a statue of Rhodes which was engaged with the modern, with a kind of vision of where our country should go to, some imaginative encounter between past and present to give us future, why would that be such a terrible thing?
It will be
Why
because
can't why can't we think laterally?
We can, but it's not realism, because the realism is the entrenchment of white social capital in South Africa, and if you and many people, by the way, have not expressed disgust, especially in the white community. So they don't find anything wrong with Rhodes. And the point that I make is that we've got to listen to the voices that have not been heard and that have been disregarded in the shaping of history, South Africa's history. In fact, including apartheid, by the way. If you look at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation's report last year, over 60% of white South Africans don't believe that apartheid was harmful to black people. How much less in regard to Rhodes, which is why we can't simply leave Rhodes there in some phony conversation with another political figure.
But if you thought it, no, I'm not just saying a figure. I think the point that I'm trying to press is, if you saw Rhodes in an engagement with a history, so it contextualized Rhodes, why would that not educate generations of white students to actually realize just where we came from? At the end of the day, if we're going to make this constitution work, we need to know history.
You're making a powerful statement by removing Rhodes. You're deconstructing Rhodes. Period. Yes, okay. You put Rhodes in a museum. There's nothing wrong in because you are minimizing the effect of Rhodes on the psyche of the majority of South Africans
I'll come to you
by
now,
trying to decorate this entity.
But then, following that, how do you get people to understand a history? I mean, let me give you an instance. I find it extraordinary that my students, by the way, black and white, know so little about much of our history. So like, you know, when you talk about the law, you have to explain to them, many of them amazingly, that there was detention without trial, all sorts of repression, and Lord alone knows what, to try to understand why the Constitution has certain of the provisions that it has today. That history is not unimportant. It's vital. They should understand it. In fact, it should fuel an anger that we aren't doing more to address the past than we are.
Look, I think we have got a broader crisis of an education system in South Africa that does not give a broader perspective of where we come from. Actually, an absolute majority of students at Wits as well who do not know where the country comes from. They think that everything as is normal and is never.
You accept that?
It's a crisis that has to be dealt with. That is why the view of the EFF is that let's remove the statues, but also the legacy of the statues. Like what was bequeathed by Rhodes, by what was bequeathed by Botha, by Verwoerd. And we need to then institute an education system that begins to conscientize our people. They know where they come from so that they can be able to define a clear path moving forward.
But that means that they need to know. They need to know that their lives, in some really profound way, were shaped by those terrible people like Rhodes.
Look, yeah, it has been shaped by those people, and but now society has come to a consensus that our colonial and apartheid past is not something worth celebrating. I mean, there's been like, whatever they advocated
celebrating,
for.
we're talking about reflecting upon. So
yes, we can make reflections, but not when those statues are in public spaces in a celebratory mode.
But
you
do
can
you
make
accept
reflections
that,
in other platforms.
Do you accept that? Do you accept that we've got to engage with that history?
I accept that we've got to engage with that history, because the whole debate about the statue is a proxy of the tension around transformation and moving forward
in the society, for goodness sake.
Yes, but this is the end of the era of euphoria around reconciliation.
I think that's right. I think that's the point.
I think that's the main point.
I think that's troubling,
especially
because where do we go now?
Because many voices that have been very vocal and critical today are those of the black middle class, which are seen as, you know, which have always been regarded as the ones who are going to be grave diggers for government. But we position ourselves as grave diggers of that white intellectual history that has been systematically exclusionist of other voices, and you know, plurality of knowledge, plurality of identities, plurality of ideas.
Sorry, you want to make one final point? Yes. I've got to end.
Very quickly, I think one of the concerns we have around the debate is removing statues is actually the easy option. Can be done within a day. But what do you replace that with, particularly to create a better understanding of why that statue had to be removed?
That's a very good. I'm sorry, I've run out of time. That's a very good way to end the conversation, because that's really the point, isn't it? The point is that if I listen to my three panelists tonight, there's general agreement. These statues should not be there in a way because they celebrate a dreadful, egregious, racist past that we should be deeply ashamed of, as opposed to actually celebrating in any way. But the question is, when you remove those statues, what do we do in relation to recounting a history which has shaped us in all manifold ways, which includes questions of reconciliation or non-reconciliation? Those are the issues. How are we going to, in a sense, engage with that history? What dialogue are we going to have with it? That's the real question. And how we do that, judge for yourself. Goodbye.